Okay, we are live streamed. Let's start with the prayer.
Yogena chittasya padena vacham malam sharirasya cha vaidyakena yopakarot tam pravaram muninam patanjalim pranjaliranatosmi.
Excellent. So welcome back. We are at a milestone. We covered all the verses of the first chapter, Samadhi Pada. So we will do a quick recap. It may not be a comprehensive coverage because we covered a lot of topic, but an overall summary just to recap. And if you have any questions on any specific topic, please text, we can cover. So Yoga Darshana, if you think about Yoga Darshana, it is the foundational textbook, the most authoritative textbook on yoga. So before talking about Yoga Darshana, we just need to understand the overall structure a little bit. If you think, remember, that's how we started. The Indian spiritual tradition, the Bharatiya spiritual tradition, or the Vedic spiritual tradition, when you look at the whole Indian spiritual tradition, it can be broadly divided into two types. One is called Nastika, the other one is called Astika. Most of the people think that Astika means those who believes in God, and Nastika means those who do not believe in God. In fact, that's not the way it is classified. Those traditions which accept the authority of Veda is Astika, and those who do not accept the authority of Veda is considered as Nastika. So that's one key difference we need to understand. So that's why even though the Buddhist teaching and the Jain teaching shares most of the stuffs common to Vedic teaching, they're considered as Nastika. 80% of the Lord Buddha's teaching is pretty much similar to what we hear in the Upanishads and the Gita, but they're considered as a different tradition because of this technical reason. So those who accept the pramana of the Veda, the authority of the Veda, that is Astika. So I got an interesting question from one of the participants, and they were asking where exactly the Sikh tradition belongs to, because it seems you didn't talk anything about the Sikh tradition. Very interesting. Sikh tradition pretty much accepts the authority of the Veda. So I don't know where to categorize them, because if you look at the Guru Granth Sahib, you can see a lot of references on Veda. So it may fall under the Astika tradition, because Guru Nanak Ji or Guru Gobind Ji or Ajahn Dev Ji all refers to the Vedas. So just an answer. So under the Nastika tradition, there are three major traditions. One is the Buddhist tradition, second one is the Jain tradition, and third one is the Charvaka tradition. Charvaka tradition is our agnostic tradition. So Charvakas are the people who do not believe in God, who do not believe in anything that the Vedas talk, and they say that this is really means it doesn't have any authority. So that is Charvakas. And even the Charvakas were respected in that tradition. So just need to understand that. So when you're coming back to the Vedic tradition or the Astika tradition, there are 6 schools. All the schools has a common goal, which is the realization of your own true self. That is the moksha, is the ultimate goal of all these 6 traditions. And all these 6 traditions shares a common theme or common point, which is their acceptance of the Vedas. So Vedas are the most authoritative scripture for all these 6 traditions. And they are, if you remember, it is Mimamsa, Nyaya, Vaisheshika, Sankhya, Yoga, and Vedanta. So I just talked about this just to make sure that we know where exactly the yoga fits in. So the yoga is an Astika tradition. It's one of the 6 schools of the Indian darshanas. Don't use the word philosophy, because philosophy means it's love for knowledge, philosophia. Here we call it as darshana, because more than understanding about the subject, because why do you study yoga, or why do you study Vedanta? There are 2 ways, 2 goals could be there. Why do I study physics? I study physics for gaining knowledge. So gaining knowledge is the ultimate goal there. But why do I study Vedanta? I don't want to be a master of the Upanishads. I want to be a master in understanding myself. So there is a slight difference. The love is not for the knowledge. The love is to understand myself. So there is a huge difference between that. That's why we prefer not to use the word philosophy. There is nothing wrong in using the word philosophy, but there is a technical difference. And the technical difference is pretty much highlighted by the usage of the word darshana in our culture, right? Not philosophy. So that's one point. So yoga darshana is one of the 6 darshanas of the Vedic tradition. Yoga darshana takes its metaphysical framework from the Sankhya, no, but not entirely Sankhya. A few portions are there from the Vedanta also, but predominantly it uses the metaphysics of Sankhya. And Maharshi Patanjali is the author of this book, and the most foundational textbook in this school, in the school of yoga, is Yoga Sutra. And again, this Yoga Sutra is not a textbook like Bhagavad Gita, which talks about the entire aspects of your life. Please keep in mind that. So the Yoga Darshana is for a serious student. A serious student who wanted to practice the meditation, because here the path is meditation, and through that path of meditation, reaching the highest goal. So most of the stuffs discussed in this book is pretty much limited to when you sit on a mat. Whereas in the case of course, there are some exceptions. Yamas, niyamas are being taught, but 90% of the time, Yoga Sutra is talking about a serious spiritual practitioner. That's unlike Bhagavad Gita, which accommodates everything and every scenarios of your life. You're eating, you're going and working on the secular front, doing your day job, everything is covered in the scope of Bhagavad Gita. So the Bhagavad Gita talks about how you can convert all your actions as a spiritual practice. But here it is a pretty much vertical slice of the Bhagavad Gita. To be very specific, the content of the Yoga Sutra is pretty much limited to the 6th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So Bhagavad Gita is more wide, whereas Yoga Sutra is more deep. That is a little bit of comparison of these 2 scriptures. And we saw that this Yoga Sutra belongs to a scriptural category known as Sutra. Because when you look at our scriptural portfolio, it's a lot. You have the Vedas, including the Upanishads. You have the Itihasas, which are Ramayana and Mahabharata. You have the Puranas, 18 Puranas and the 18 Upapuranas. And of course, you have a lot of Tamil Puranas, like Periya Purana, Skanda Purana, Shiva Purana, etc. So the scope of the Purana is even bigger. So you had Vedas, you have Itihasas, you have Puranas, 3. 4, you have Sutras. Sutras means aphorisms. Aphorisms means it's a small cryptic way of representing the truth. The simple example I said is F equal to ma, an equation. or E equal to mc square. So you represents a large concept using a few letters. This is the style of formulas. Exactly. That's the, because if you try to explain the E equal to mc square, you can go books after books after books. Einstein's book itself is like 400 pages. So that one sutra, this is exactly what sutra.
Codified.
I don't know. Those who studied in like Malayalam medium or Tamil medium or English medium, sorry, Hindi medium, you see, in equation, how do you refer in Malayalam or Hindi? Sutra Vakya.
Sutra, yes.
Right? A plus B the whole square equal to A square plus B square plus 2AB, Sutra Vakya. That's how they are present. So that's Sutra. So you have Vedas, you have Itihasas, you have Puranas, you have Sutras, you have means Bhashyas, Tikas, Vivaranas. So Bhashya, Tika, Vivarana means you take another form of scripture and you try to explain that in a detailed manner. So if you look at Yoga Sutra, you have the commentary of Vyasa, that is Bhashya. And then you have the Vivarana of Shankaracharya. Vivarana means what? A commentary upon the commentary. Then there's a Tika. Tika means you're explaining the words, technical terms, and you add a lot of additional stuff. So that is Tika. So this is another category of scripture literature. And additionally, you have the Prakarana Granthas. Prakarana Granthas are fundamental books which introduces the key concepts or the technical terms. So you have Atma Bodha, you have Tattva Bodha, you have Viveka Chudamani, and in regional language, if you take, you have the Atmopatesha Shatakam. Such books are there. And then there is another category of literature which is known as Prarthanas, Gitas, and Stotras, etc. Right? You have the Nirvana Shatkam, you have Bhajagovindam, you have Deva Dashakam. All these comes under that category. So then you have, additionally, you have these, if you extend this a little bit further, you have these Mahakavyas, Natakas, like Kalidasa's work, Raghuvamsham. See, our scriptural portfolio is so big, so vast. And out of that, you have one area, which is the sutra, and that's what this is. Again, I just wanted to make sure that you have that bigger picture. When people say it means you have only one book, this here you have a library. So somebody was joking to me because in a school, somebody was asking, who is your God? They say population. Because technically every saint or a rishi can be considered as a prophet or a god. That's why the Western tradition get confused when they look at this Sanatana Dharma. Who is your prophet? A population of them. It's not one Buddha or a one Jesus Christ or a one Krishna. A population of them. And potentially they can come here afterwards. And then what is your, how many books you have? A library. And then how many paths you have? Oh, many God. Any number of yogas. Of course, ultimately it has to go through the knowledge, but as a spiritual practitioner, I can practice, I can take a large number of paths. So this is the beauty. And here there is one such path, yoga. So the purpose of this yoga, we started by defining, right? The word yoga has two different meanings. One is yuj yojane, yujro iti samadhi. These are the two definitions. The first one is samadhi, yujiro iti samadhi. Yoga is the state of samadhi, or yoga is a practice which takes you to the state of samadhi. If you remember, I told, right? You can say that Washington DC is Washington DC, or a bus which is going to Washington DC. It's all, you say that this is DC. It is written there DC. That means it is not DC. It only means that if you get into that bus and if that bus goes correctly, it reaches DC. So when you say bhakti yoga, bhakti is not samadhi, but if you pursue bhakti properly, you may end up in samadhi. This is the first category. Second category is what? Moksha or kaivalya. Union with your true self. These are the two different goals of yoga. And the first chapter, the scope of the first chapter is Samadhi, because you're not talking about Kaivalya. That is the goal of the fourth chapter. So the Yoga Sutra has 4 chapters. First chapter is known as Samadhi Pada. The scope of that chapter is you're talking about the state of Samadhi. We will explain what is Samadhi in a minute, but scope of Samadhi. Then the second chapter is known as Sadhana Pada. What is Samadhi? Second chapter, how do I get Samadhi? So what practice I should take? What practices I should take? Somebody's phone is on. Anyway, okay. So what practices I should take to reach the goal of Samadhi? That is Sadhana Pada. And that's where the famous topic, the most, whenever people talk about Patanjali Yoga, what comes to your mind is the Ashtanga Yoga. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, that type of yoga. So that's what the scope of the second chapter. And the third chapter is called Vibhudipada. Vibhudipada, technically speaking, the whole Ashtanga Yoga is not entirely described in the second chapter. It spills to the third chapter. But really, for the title, the third chapter means glories of once you gain the state of Samadhi, what exactly is the benefit you are going to get? That is what it is. Last chapter is called Kaivalya Pada. That is the union part. So these are the 4 different sections of the Yoga Sutra. Samadhi Pada, Sadhana Pada, Vibhuti Pada, and Kaivalya Pada. So these 4. So now, what is Samadhi? Samadhi is not a binary state, meaning it is not a specific state. Rather, it's a continuum. It's a range of state. The broad definition of Samadhi is Samadhi. It's a stable state, a well-placed mental state. A well-placed mental state is known as Samadhi. A Samadhi state means a mind is working the way it should work. The emotions are appropriate, proportional to circumstances. It is healthy. It is stable. That is the broad range. And the lower end of this, because for that to understand, you need to understand what exactly the state through which a typical mind can go through. Here we talked about 5 different states. The first is known as Chitta. Chitta means your destructive state. You have no idea about what you are doing. You don't care who is in front of you. You don't know what exactly you are acting. It is completely, you have zero control of yourself. That is called destructive state. Then the second state is Mudha, your extremely depressed state. This is two different. One is characterized by the hyperactivity, whereas the Mudha characterized by the dull, slow activity, depressed state. Now you may ask me, right? Is that again as one particular state? Can you say that these are all the parameters by which you say that this is depressed and this is destructive? No, this is only a classification. That means it can be in between also, right? So just for the sake of classification, you identify them as 2. But practically, there can be infinite amount of state possible between these 2. Please understand that. So I got a question, because is that means that your mind exactly transition from state A to state B to state C to state D? No. The best way to understand is those who studied compiler design in computer science, that is called, I think you might have studied the automata theory, right? There is finite state automata and infinite state automata. Practically speaking, everything is infinite state. How do you put that into finite state? You categorize a set of stuff into one state. So, right? So NFA to DFA conversion is a famous mathematical model you use. Exactly the same thing. This is exactly what you're doing here. You're categorizing a large number of state into one category. So Vikshipta, the Mudha, and the third category is Vikshipta. Vikshipta means Visheshena Chitta. It's not as bad as Chitta, but it's called distracted state. And most of us are in that state. Distracted state. Occasionally we get focused, but what happens? That focus is not sustained. That's the distracted state. These states are not samadhi state, or these are not good, means ideal healthy states. Then there are other two states, which is known as ekagra. They're focused. And then there is a state called nirodha, controlled. These two are the healthy state of the mind. And samadhi refers to these two states. When you have deep concentration, you can say that you are at the lower end of the samadhi. And when you have the complete control over the mental activities, where you can even suspend the last thought, that is the higher end of the nirodha. So these two states put together called samadhi. This is the goal. So what this chapter is going to cover is talk about that state of samadhi and try to make us understand this is not something very mystic. See, there is nothing mystic here. You just need to understand the samadhi. What is samadhi? That is very well explained in this whole chapter. So we start with the statement of intent. Atha yoganushasana. Now I begin the teaching of this yoga for committed students. Right? So atha is athetyoyam adhikarartha. It tells you need to possess certain quality. Adhikara means it is not a caste discrimination or it is a gender discrimination, nothing. Adhikara means your qualification. Qualification is pretty much needed. Suppose you are going for Kailash mountain, you need certain fitness of your body, otherwise you cannot climb there. So like that, what exactly is that basic qualification? It is your commitment. It is your commitment to dharma. Basically that it is. That's a very high level. Of course, means you talk about shama, dhamma, uparati, titiksha, etc. That's all details. But your desire to study this, your commitment to the practice, and your commitment to the dharma is good enough. That's it. So Anushasana means Patanjali is reiterating that I'm not creating anything new. It is only Anushasanam. It is not Shasanam. It is, I'm just retelling what is given in the Vedas. I'm not doing anything new. And you might have seen this, Krishna also talking the same thing in the Bhagavad Gita. I'm not doing it new. So that's then the second to four sutra, we have a most beautiful definition of yoga. Yogaha chitta vritti nirodha. The ability to control my mental activities are known as yoga. So if you remember, we had a long discussion, what is chitta, what is vritti, the example of a lake, the waves, the content of the waves, detailed discussion. So ability to control the mental activity is known as yoga. And when I control the mental activity, when I get the chitta vritti nirodha, what happens? Tada drashtuhu swarupe avasthanam. The drashtu, the seer, establishes or get connected with his own state. You will realize that who you are, and what you have. So you will realize that you are Purusha, not Prakriti. Your consciousness, not matter. Otherwise, what is going to happen? Otherwise, you will get identified with vrittis, mental activities. I feel that I'm sad, I'm this, I'm depressed. All these mental activities are going to take me for a ride. Brilliantly painted. So if my goal is to control my mental activities, I need to understand what are all the type of vrittis I need to control. So Patanjali gives 5 types of vrittis. And he also tells each of these vrittis can be klishta and aklishta. Klishta means that which gives you klesha, and aklishta means that which gives you not a klesha. Klesha means troubles or afflictions, whatnot. So there are 5 types of vrittis are pramana, vipariya, vikalpa, nidra, smritayaha. Pramana means the vrittis that gives you the correct knowledge. They are of 3, pratyaksha, anumana, and agama. Pratyaksha means direct perception. direct experience. Anumana means inference. You do not have direct experience, but you infer certain facts from what you see. For example, smoke, you see that there is fire. That's one example. And then Anumana, then the third category is Agama. Agama means Vedas. Larger context, any scripture. So these three are the means to give you the right means of knowledge. That's it. And then the next category is Vipariya. It is means misinterpretation of something. Vikalpa means false knowledge, complete imagination. Vikalpa means it is created by your mind, but it is not there outside. Then Vikalpa, Nidra means sleep. Sleep is considered as a special kind of mental activity where the tamas will cover the sattva and rajas, again using the Sankhyan model. And then Smritayaha means there is nothing outside, but the vrittis are created from the previously stored memory. So once we understand this, the next topic, which is, so verse 5 to 11, 5 types of vrittis are described. So Pramana, Viparya, Vikalpa, Nidra, Smritayaha. Now, how do you control this mental activity? 2 steps were given. How do you gain? So if your mind has constant flow of these mental activities, how do you gain control over that? 2 simple techniques. Exactly quoted in the Bhagavad Gita also. Arjuna said, asked the same question. How do you control my mind? Krishna said, Abhyase Chitta Kaunteya Vairagyena. Abhyasa and Vairagya. Exactly the same thing. Abhyasa means continuous practice. Vairagya means ability to get away from certain type of active discipline. That is Vairagya. So Abhyasa and Vairagya is brilliantly defined. Abhyasa means what? Consistent effort for a sufficient period of time is going to give you the result. Remember that consistency, regular, consistent effort for a sufficient period of time, focused, consistent, regular effort for a consistent period of, for a period of time is going to give you the result. Vairagya is what? Your ability to detach from what is not good for you and connect with what is good for you. A simple translation: ability to disconnect from the unhealthy food and get connected with the good food. Most of you start the dieting and things. Initially, when you started these salads and things like that, right? It would have been difficult for you. But over a period of time, when you do that, it's okay. Those who are diabetic, right? Initially, when you drink your coffee without sugar, it would have been difficult. But over a period of time, no problem. If you practice it consistently. So this is the Abhyasa and Vairagya are very much needed to achieve anything in the life. So this is very important. And once it is done, the Abhyasa and Vairagya is going to take you to the state of Samadhi. And Samadhi means, don't think that Samadhi is one stage. The Samadhi is broadly defined into 2 categories. One is called Samprajnada Samadhi, and the other one is called Asamprajnada Samadhi. At the end of the chapter, there is a long discussion on this topic. But on a high level, Samprajnada Samadhi means what? You are, means it is not the 100% Samadhi. There is something to be known other than yourself. Your focus is not entirely on the, you're not completely absorbed on the Purusha. There is some knowledge. Prajna means knowledge. It could be a mental object created in your mind and your focus is on that, not on the actual Purusha. So that type of Samadhi is known as Samprajnada Samadhi. And the Samprajnada Samadhi has a lot of other division. It is known as Savitarka, Savichara, Sananda, Sa Asmita. And there, later point of time, you will say that the Savitarka is divided, means Vitarka Samadhi is divided into 2, Savitarka and Nirvitarka. So let's try to understand. So Savitarka means your meditation, you're sitting on meditation, and the focus of the meditation is an external physical object. So the form of Lord Shiva can be considered as Vitarka Samadhi, because you're meditating upon a physical object. When the meditation of the object of meditation is not a physical object, something which cannot directly see, something you cannot directly experience by a sense organ, that is called Vichara Samadhi. So if you meditate upon the love, feeling of love, or the grace, or even Sukshma Tanmatra, those are not physically experienced by the sense organs. So that is known as Vichara Samadhi. So Vitarka Samadhi is meditation on the physical object. So the smell, taste, sense of touch, sense of sound, means the sound you listen. When you do the Om meditation, it is Vitarka Samadhi. What does that mean? 90% of the meditation we practice is Vitarka. In all the meditation classes we do is Vitarka. So which is the beginning stages of the Patanjali scheme of meditation. So Vitarka Samadhi, Vichara Samadhi. Once you go through the Vichara Samadhi, you go to the Ananda Samadhi. Meaning when you go through deeper stages of meditation, it gives you some joy, sense of joy, some bliss, not the actual Ananda, but some bliss will be there. And if your object of meditation is that bliss or that Ananda, which is created by the meditation, that is Ananda Samadhi. And then there is Asmita Samadhi. Asmita Samadhi means you are meditating upon yourself. So you're meditating upon the Purusha, which is reflected in the mind. This is Asmita Samadhi. So this is Vitarka, Vichara, Ananda, Asmita. These are the 4 subcategories of Samprajnata Samadhi. And adding complication, this Vitarka Samadhi can be divided into 2. Savitarka, Nirvitarka. Vichara Samadhi also can be divided into 2. So Savitarka, Savichara, Savitarka, Nirvitarka, Savichara, Nirvichara, Ananda, Asmita Samadhi. So Vitarka you have 2, Vichara you have 2, Ananda, Asmita, 6 levels of Samadhi. So Asamprajnata Samadhi is 6 different stages. Now, what is the difference between Savitarka and Nirvitarka? So we said the human mind has 2 major functions. One is the cognitive function. Second one is the analytical function. Whatever you experience in the external world. So look at the beauty of the Yoga Sutra here. This is what you can amazingly getting into the details of the human mind, you can see here. So when you perceive a worldly object, for example, when I see a person in front of me, say that it is my daughter. So a mental image of that person is created in my mind. That is the cognitive function. But immediately that mental image is supplemented with something in my mind. She is my daughter. Naturally, I love her. All those additional colors. So more than what you see externally, I see something which is colored by my mental impressions. So this is pretty much needed for day-to-day life. I need to know what is my relationship with that. I need to apply my intelligence. So Shankaracharya, remember I explained Shankaracharya's commentary here. He said, you need this. So normal life, the flow, the sequence of activity, if you think, it is first cognition, then analysis. These 2 put together, the perception complete. But when you try to develop the control over the mind, you want to gain control over these 2 functions also. You want to know, like, when should I engage my cognition? When should I engage my analytics there? Just think about this. 90% of the time, the human problem happens because of this wrong analytics. So if you have more control over that analytics, you can differentiate between the fact and your superimposition on the facts. Simple example. Your boss didn't smile at you tomorrow when you go to work. The reason could be he may have had a fight with his wife. That was the reason. But what would be you will be interpreting? Oh, I did something wrong. Probably I need to get a job. So there is nothing wrong in doing that, because sometimes what happens, that type of analysis help you to reach the fact. But here the problem is the human mind works completely uncontrolled. The way it goes to one state of analysis to the other state of the analysis, I do not have any control. It completely goes out of the control. Einstein famously says in one of his books, see, when you have a problem, if you stay in the problem mindset, you cannot come to the solution. Einstein always say, you need to take your mind out of that problem mindset to come up with the solution. But the natural way of the mind functions from state transition to state transition is completely uncontrolled. So here you have a tendency to interpret yourself wrongly. When you look at yourself, you always think that I am the body, the mind, and the intellect. That is how the conditioning is. So if you want to understand yourself properly, who you are, you need to have the ability to detach that analytical function from the mind. That is the reason, because everywhere else the analytics is good, but because of this habitual thinking, your mind may try to interpret yourself as the body, which is wrong. So if you want to experience the Purusha, as Prakriti, you have to suspend your analytical function. And gaining that control is through this Nirvichara Samadhi, Nirvitarka Samadhi. This is the 6 stages of Samprajñāta Samadhi. And when you gain the 6 stages of Samprajñāta Samadhi, Patanjali tells your amount of sattva in your mind increases. It gives you immense clarity. And finally, you reach a state where you suspend all your mental activities. This is the yoga style. Again, I said there is a technical difference between yoga and Vedanta here. Based on the yoga style, you suspend all the mental activities, and what remains only is the Purusha. So usually the Purusha will try to see what is projected in the mind. When there is nothing projected in the mind, Purusha will recognize its own presence. Just like a crystal, usually what you see in the crystal is the reflection of the cloth in front of that. And when you remove that cloth for a small period of time, what is going to happen? You see the crystal as crystal. Once you see the crystal as crystal, thereafterwards, if you see the crystal superimposed by the color in front of that crystal, you know that the color belongs to the external cloth, but the crystal is pure and white. Same way, yoga, asamprajñāta samadhi, you try to suspend all the mental activities and you see the Purusha as Purusha. One time you need to experience it. After that, it is good. So this is the 2nd stages of Samadhi. So Samadhi, if you see, there are 7 stages of Samadhi. What are all the 7 stages? Savitarka Samadhi, Nirvitarka Samadhi, Savichara Samadhi, Nirvichara Samadhi, Sananda Samadhi, Sa-asmita Samadhi, Asamprajñāta Samadhi, or Nirbija Samadhi. This is the 7th stage. So these are the different stages of Samadhi we explained. Now, how do you gain this? Patanjali tells concentration. First, where you need to start? You have to start with deep concentration. And apart from the deep concentration, right? Is there any way I can accelerate this? It gives a lot of steps. The first one is Ishvara Pranidhana. Understand Ishvara. Who is Ishvara? He is the order of the universe, intelligent order of the universe, and surrender to him. And what is the symbolic representation of the Ishvara? Om. We spent one whole session explaining what is Pranavaha. Praharshena Navaha Pranavaha Ishvaraha. Om is the representation of sound syllable that represents that Ishvara is Om. Right? So Ishvara Pranidhana, and surrender to that Ishvara. And then what is there are so many obstacles in this path. So there are so many obstacles, right? So you talk about disease. If you are physically fit, sick, you cannot do it. And in the 3rd chapter, Patanjali tells, if you are physically sick, too much sick, don't try to cure through yoga. Go to doctor. Take medicine first. So Vyadhi means we talk about the doubt, right? That is the other obstacle. Doubt that comes under the teaching. Then carelessness. If you're not care, if you're not mindful, this is a problem. Then you have this sloth. You have this lack of detachment. Yes, I want to get out of these worldly stuffs, but I cannot. I want to follow a healthy eating. I cannot. Ability to detach. That's a problem. Then Pranti Darshana. Pranti Darshana means not seeing things correctly. That is another obstacle. Then, so these are some of the obstacles, right? The ability to keep the mind stable. All this is problem. I want to meditate. I go and sit, but the mind won't stay stable. So we saw around 9 different obstacles in this path. And these obstacles will manifest as different things. You know, right? How do you check for this obstacle? Patanjali gives suffering, right? So there are a few things he tells, like dukkha, dejection, like if you feel dejected at times, that means, yes, these troubles, you're still not free. Trembling, and your breathing pattern itself is going to tell you whether you are stressed or not. Again, look at this. This is a very modern scientific discovery. Your stress is impacted, or you can see your shallow breathing as an indication of stress. It's a Nobel Prize winning discovery in the recent times. So you see whether your body is affected by this stress. You can see from your breathing pattern. That is what we said here. So verse 30 to 33, 30 to 32, you see all these points. And mind you, like already we talked about 2 to 3 Nobel Prize winning discoveries in this things. And then you have 33 to 39. Beautiful topics, right? He tells, if Ishvara Pranidhana seems to be difficult, where do I meditate? He says, meditate on any external objects. That is fine. You can meditate upon the nature. You can meditate upon some sound. You can meditate upon the breathing. Why? He gives a technical explanation. Everything is Ishvara. So when you meditate a beautiful sunrise, you meditate upon the rain. So now you understand where all these meditation comes into being. Like there is no meditation in the world which is not given by Yoga Sutra. So the scope is so big. It extends from the conventional Ishvara type of meditation to every objects in the modern world. So that is the topic. Any meditation is fine. So another thing, another way of removing the obstacle is developing some virtues in your mind. Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, if you remember. Friendship with other people, compassion to the other people, joy of your mind. One thing I'm 100% convinced, we think that cheating other people and non-healthy values of the mind is going to give you short-term profit. Yeah, it may give you the short-term profit, but end of the day, it cannot make you happy, 100%. So in our scriptures, right? So this is where the yoga goes beyond the mat. The yoga goes beyond the conventional Hatha Yoga teachings in the studios. Very important. Your character is very important. What type of virtues you cultivate in your mind. And if anybody is interested, the best reference is the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, Devasurika Sampatti, or the 13 values. And I always refer a book called Value of the Values by Swami Dayananda. It's a beautiful book which talks about what exactly is the value of these values. And he starts the book with a very interesting statement. He tells a value has a value only when you realize the value of that value. Think through that. A value has a value only when you realize the value of the value. That is why this book. And that book is directly an interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13. I think Rajesh Menonji has already put this book in our library also, the online library. Anybody can take it. It's a beautiful book. So Maitri, Karuna, Mudita, and such things are there. Then another means to stabilize your mind. Pranayama. Pranayama is a powerful means to stabilize your mind. Meditation on external objects, all that is discussed. So stabilizing and clearing the mind is discussed from verse 33 to 39. And finally, the last portion, we talk about the state called Samapatti. Samapatti is the complete meditative absorption. In this particular area, we spoke again, right? Patanjali comes back to that topic of Samadhi. So in fact, I already fast forwarded on verse 17 and 18. You don't get the difference between Savitarka, Nirvitarka. Those topics are explained here. So the 7 stages of Samadhi is brilliantly explained. 7 stages of Samadhi. It is Savitarka Samadhi. Savitarka Samadhi means a mental object is created for the meditation, which is from an external object colored by my mental analytics. That is Savitarka Samadhi. Nirvitarka Samadhi means I shut down the interpretation of the mind. I just focus on the physical object. Savitarka, Nirvitarka. Savichara, Nirvichara. Again, a subtle object is focused, and second stage is the analytic function is disabled. Sananda, Sa Asmita. And from there, Asamprajnata Samadhi. So this is an overview of the entire Samadhi Pada. 51 verses, brilliant chapter, especially last portions. A few portions are hard to understand, but I feel at least technically we are okay. When we go to the second chapter, which is Sadhana Pada, which is more relevant to us as practitioners. We wanted to understand how can we practice whatever and get into where we reached. So that's the next chapter. And as practitioners, this is the most important step for us. So from next week, we will start this Sadhana Pada. And from there, we will continue. So with that, we can stop this session and we can have